Hi, it's Colin Cowherd. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
Obviously, the initial reaction is to look at what Philly sent out, right? Because they did end up including Seth Curry, which was something that I advocated for them to do. Because like I said, this isn't Russell Westbrook. This is James Harden. This is a player of the necessary caliber to justify sending out role players. Now, the instant reaction, as is always the case, especially on NBA Twitter, is for people to overreact to including draft picks. But for those of you who know Daryl Morey, there's really not a GM in the league that cares less about first-round draft picks, especially ones towards the end of the first round, than Daryl Morey. Because historically, statistically speaking, there's just not a great chance of you getting anything of really high quality in the 20s when you're drafting in the first round. And as Daryl Morey knows, it's so easy to pick up draft picks at any point along the way, just in one single bad season, just by eating a bad contract or something along those lines. So I do not feel like Daryl overpaid. I think he was just making a very simple calculation of odds. If you remember, Daryl Morey in press conferences recently, during this whole Ben Simmons saga, made it very clear that he would not trade Ben Simmons unless it significantly increased their championship odds. He was very clear about that intention. And so what he's weighing here is a crack at this, a chance this season for things to break right for Philly and to break wrong for other teams, combining the odds of that with future seasons. Because I think Daryl knew he could get James this summer, but he got an extra crack at it this year. And by doing that, he increased his championship odds, which like he said, that was his goal all along. So I think to him, that's the price of the price of that was those two additional first round draft picks. And they're probably not going to miss those that badly as time progresses anyway. The really interesting thing to look at here is James Harden and his and the weird angle that he has added to this whole thing with his attitude. Because, you know, like many of you guys, I grew up listening to Colin Cowherd, and he used to have this bit that he would do on divorce. And he would talk about how, like, hey, if you get divorced, you know, usually people will sympathize with you because divorce happens. It's normal. People can be in love and they can fall out of love for one of many reasons, right? But if they got divorced a second time, you'd start to kind of look a little sideways at the person and wonder if maybe something was going on. And then, like, if it was a third divorce, that's when you'd start to look at the guy and be like, hey, maybe this is a you problem, right? And this is now the second time in the last calendar year that James Harden has nuked his way out of a basketball situation because he was unhappy for one reason or another. And it's really strange because he was clearly unhappy in Houston when he was with Chris Paul, when he legitimately had a real chance to win a championship. If he made any shots in 2018 in that playoff series against the Warriors, he probably wins the title. But then he decides after the next season that it's all Chris Paul's fault because he's coaching him too much or has too big of an ego or whatever the heck his problem was. And so he demands a swap, and he gets Russell Westbrook instead of CP3, a significantly lesser player. Then that backfires on him. And when that backfires on him, he pouts, skips training camp, is spotted at strip clubs and stuff while all of his teammates are in camp getting ready for the season. And he plays some of the worst basketball of his career to nuke his way out to get to Brooklyn. And it's funny because you could see why he wanted to go to Brooklyn, because that was his best chance to win a title, right? You know, like alongside Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, limit some of his shortcomings as a playoff initiator. As we've seen in his career, he gets fatigued and tends to fall apart in those settings. And so you would imagine he'd be happy there. But some normal turmoil that is generally associated with just a normal regular season, especially during COVID, like some guys getting hurt or a couple guys having to miss some time and you having to do more as a player than you normally would have to do to just carry the team for a short stretch of the season. Apparently that's too much to ask for James Harden here, because he's got Kevin freaking Durant on his team and he had his eyes down in Philly. As soon as things started to go south, he gets the wandering eye. And it's funny because I think that James Harden just cost himself his best chance to win a title as an NBA player. As I said before, the trade does make both teams better. I really do believe that James Harden as a superstar perimeter initiator makes Philly better. And obviously Ben Simmons makes the Nets better, which we'll get to later. But I do not think Philly, even though they are better now than they were before the trade, I do not think they have a real chance to beat Milwaukee. I do not think they have a real chance to beat Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving. Would you pick James Harden in a playoff series like that over one of those guys? I think Milwaukee would beat Philly soundly. So the question becomes, why was Brooklyn still the title favorite on FanDuel before this trade? They were because, just like all of us know from watching that team, they were destroying Milwaukee before Kyrie Irving sprained his ankle without James Harden. I think we can all agree that if that team was healthy, they probably win the title. Kevin Durant was literally 1 inch away on a turnaround jump shot from ending that series in Game 7, even with the hampered James Harden and even with the injured and unavailable Kyrie Irving. So I think he had his best chance right in front of him in Brooklyn. If he could just weather the storm, if he could just carry the team for a little while until Kevin Durant came back from a knee injury, if he could just carry the team for a little while until maybe a mandate changes and Kyrie's available, or until Joe Harris can come back from his ankle surgery. But for whatever reason, he got the wandering eye. And now I think he's on a Philly team that's better, a legit title contender. They have a chance, but I'm not picking that team over any of these other guys. I don't think they can beat Phoenix or Golden State or Milwaukee or Brooklyn. It's a long shot to think that they could beat Miami at this point with James Harden at the helm. So it's funny. I think his own wandering eye, his own finicky nature might have actually cost him his best chance to win the title, which is absolutely crazy to me. As far as the Brooklyn angle goes, it's really not all that complicated. Like, they need somebody to fill in that spot-up shooter role alongside the stars. That was what they've been missing so badly with Joe Harris out, and Seth Curry's a perfect fit there. I actually think Seth Curry is a significantly better offensive player than Joe Harris. Joe Harris is a bigger, stronger athlete, so he's a little bit more of he's a little bit better of a fit in Brooklyn's switching defensive scheme, and that will be a shortcoming that they'll have to overcome. Obviously, if you have guys like Seth Curry on the floor, they can be targeted in a playoff series, but he does fill in that offensive void and then some that you lost with Joe Harris. But that team has always been about finesse and offense. They've never had that brute force physicality on the roster. Their best brute force physicality has always been just the fact that Kevin Durant is super tall, and when he does try on defense, he can cause some problems. But they have a real rim pressuring freak athlete player that is a deeply impactful player on the defensive end now in Ben Simmons. Similar to the James Harden thing, I don't expect his attitude to be an issue now the way it was in Philly. I think both players were acting out. I don't think that acting out is going to continue. I think Ben Simmons will buy in and be a very productive player in Brooklyn. And he fills, like I said, that very specific archetype of that defensive-minded forward that can guard the other team's best player and be a good rim pressuring player alongside all your shooting. And that's where it gets really exciting, because Ben Simmons is one of the best drive-and kick three-point shot creators that we have in the league. And so giving him transition opportunities with Kevin Durant on the wing, with Kyrie Irving on the wing, with Seth Curry on the wing, if Joe Harris can get healthy with him out there, it's really easy to see a new dynamic to that Brooklyn offense that could be really, really hard to stop. And that defensive end is the part that's most interesting to me. Because in that Eastern Conference semifinal series against Milwaukee last year, there was a lot of Blake Griffin guarding Giannis. And he did okay, because Blake is savvy and he's big and strong and he moved his feet the best that he could. But towards the end of that series, Milwaukee had that figured out. They were doing a good job of clearing the side on his post-ups and giving him more space to operate, and he was torching Brooklyn in that series. Ben Simmons is a great body to throw at Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's a significant weapon to have in a playoff series. Do we think Brooklyn would have beat Milwaukee if they were healthy last year? Yes. Do we think they would have done it again this year? Most likely. However, that series takes on a new dynamic now because let's say Giannis is just better. Let's say 50-point Game 6 NBA Finals Giannis is closer to what Giannis is going to be in that series than what he actually was last year in that series. If that's the case, that could tip the scales. And so having a guy like Ben Simmons, a legitimate defensive weapon to throw at Giannis, gives you just another card in your hand that you might be able to play in that series. I talk about all the time on the show that these playoff series, they're like chess matches. It's always like move, counter move. And you're always working the matchups. And so having a guy like Ben Simmons that you can throw into those specific matchups gives you just an additional versatility, and it increases your odds of being able to make that happen. So, the question that we always ask ourselves after a deal like this is who won the trade? And it's easy to say Philly because they got the best player, right? Like Ben Simmons, his stock is at an all-time low because of his disastrous performance. And, we forget what he's capable of, and because we always just have that missed dunk burned into our memory, right? But the truth is I look at it as what team has the best chances to win the title. It's hard not to think of Brooklyn as the winner when you factor in the fact that they right now look like the team that is most capable of actually hoisting the trophy, even though they sent away the best player in the trade. So I love the move for both teams, but I think Brooklyn's the winner. I think they have the best chance to win the title. And again, James Harden, it's time to put up or shut up, man. You have forced your way out of situations. You've got yourself into another situation here where there's a lot of pressure on you, and you don't have a great history in these moments. So I'm curious to see if he can live up to that.